There are places on the galactic map, marked not by coordinates or resources, but by blood and despair. Litoris 7, a wild, ice-bound planet where only death's patience dares linger. No one belongs here. No human has ever lasted long on this land of the dead. And now, a lone human walks its surface. His name is Marcus Vane, former commander of Expeditionary Unit Delta 42 Solace Alliance. A man abandoned in every sense of the word. The sole survivor after his shuttle crashed into the frozen hell of this world. The shuttle struck Litoris like a slash from fate itself. Outside, endless blizzards. Inside, Marcus Mark 13 combat armor. Glowing red alerts pulsing like silent screams. Remaining power, 3%. Life support systems, limited functionality. Unit status, ALONE. He let out a dry, brittle laugh behind the respirator mask. The only thing left to him now was not belief, not hope, but raw survival instinct. The cold wind sliced through Litoris like sharpened glass, sweeping across scattered wreckage from the Hyperion shuttle. Fragments of hull, scorched armor plates, and blood. The blood of his comrades. No rescue was coming. No signal could pierce through the electromagnetic storms that blanketed this dead world. Marcus tightened the strap on his worn plasma rifle, a weapon that had accompanied him through dozens of campaigns. But this was no longer war, no longer a mission. Only one thing remained: survival. He muttered to himself, voice hoarse like a spell against collapse. "Keep moving, Vane. Head north to the geologic ridge," because he knew a rule no one needed to teach. On a dead planet like this, stopping means death. Stay silent too long, and fear would destroy the mind before the cold could destroy the body. But Marcus Vane didn't know. Fate was about to throw him into a challenge, a decision found in no military training manual. In the white wastelands of Litoris, where no life should exist, he was about to face a life form from a species unknown. A life form that humanity was never meant to touch. The frozen planet Ferenth 7. A world where even the most ancient predators of the Elyrian Empire tread with caution. Beneath the cold white sky, under the endless snowstorm, Captain Marcus Dine of the Orion Alliance Expeditionary Force trudged forward, step by heavy step inside his battered Mark Wuffen environment suit. Behind him, the scout vessel Ardent Flame had exploded, leaving nothing but twisted metal and a faint column of black smoke struggling against the cutting winds. Communications, dead. Power reserves, critically low. In Marcus' mind now, only one command pulsed through his survival instincts. Stay alive. But what awaited him in the blizzards of Ferenth 7 was not the simple, quiet death by freezing. Through the flickering static of his cracked HUD, a figure emerged from the storm, at least 3 meters tall, walking with unshakable pride. Her skin shimmered in molten bronze under the snowstorm, like living metal heated in a forge. This was no monster, this was a queen. Queen Neris Kael'thera, royal blood of war from the Elyrian Empire, sovereign of one of the most terrifying alien species in the Eastern Galaxy. Her living Netherium armor clung to a flawless form shaped by centuries of genetic perfection. Those burning golden eyes locked onto Marcus, the lone human trespasser in forbidden lands. She laughed, the cold, contemptuous laughter of a war goddess who had crushed civilizations older than his world. Truly? Her voice rumbled, deep, hoarse, echoing from untold millennia of war. You humans believe that mere survival gives you the right to negotiate with the Elyrian Empire. Marcus tightened his grip on his weathered plasma rifle, the last thing he had left. But he didn't raise it. Instead, he let out a dry, unmistakably human laugh. "No, Your Majesty. We're just human. But humans have something that every empire fears." Kyalthira's gaze narrowed. "And what is that?" Marcus shrugged, standing alone amid the storm-white wasteland. "We don't know how to be afraid." Silence hung like iron between two beings from opposite worlds. Then she stepped forward, her massive bare feet crushing the ancient ice beneath her. Her Elyrian weapon pulsed with crimson light, like the last heartbeat of a dying planet. "Very well. You will die, like a small, defiant warrior," Marcus smirked, "or live like a lunatic who doesn't know his limits." And in that moment, balanced between death and pride, between war and the relentless human will to survive, a different story began. A story even the Elyrian queen never saw coming. A story she would never forget. Kane Drayven, Earthborn special operative, survivor of a catastrophic scout ship crash, had no idea the real test would begin after surviving. Before him stood Queen Xalara, the tallest, coldest, most ruthless creature ever recorded in the Alliance tactical archives. And now, she was just a blood-soaked figure collapsed in the snow of a strange world. She looked at him, no fear, no plea. Only the silence of someone who had already accepted death. "What are you waiting for, Earthborn?" Her voice rasped. "Shoot!" Kane gripped his weapon, then slowly lowered it. He said nothing. He simply approached, step by careful step, then knelt beside her broken body, placing a hand on the crack in her orange bronze armor. "Your spine is fractured," he murmured, scanning through his HUD. "Third neural segment in your species, almost completely severed." "I know." She closed her eyes. "And I accept it." "Well, I don't." Her eyes opened, startled. "What madness makes you carry a half-dead Elyrian across a hunting field full of predators? Who do you think you are?" Kane didn't answer. He just tightened the straps, lifted her onto his back. "I'm human," he whispered. "And for humans, there's one unshakable rule. No one gets left behind." Every step Kane took pressed heavily into the thick snow, as if the entire planet Virelia itself was pushing back against him. On his back, the nearly paralyzed body of Queen Xalara sent a chill down his spine, but also stirred something deeper, something awakening within him. Not love, not pity, but an intelligent survival instinct. "There's a cave, northwest," she whispered, her voice thin as mist. "I once set a monitoring outpost there. If it's still active..." He nodded, his eyes locked onto the white haze stretching endlessly ahead. Behind them, the hunters were tracking the scent of blood and heat, and they were closing in. He ran, no time to think. Only one thing burned fiercely in his mind. "If I die trying to save a life." A roar echoed behind them. A black shape broke through the tree line. Kane spun, drew his weapon, pulled the trigger. Thud! The massive body crashed down, carving a long trench in the snow. "They're faster." He gritted his teeth, sweat beading inside the freezing armor. But ahead, the mountain crevice emerged. He lunged forward, just as a plasma bolt screamed through the air, exploding behind him. The stone walls collapsed, sealing the entrance, sealing the hunters out, and in the darkness, as Kane's visor adjusted to the low light, he saw an ancient gate, not built by humans, not of the Sarathar forces, a spiraling structure, as if carved from living light, quietly opening before them. Xalara whispered, her voice carrying something unfamiliar. Fear. This is not a place for humans. Kane turned. He smiled, but his eyes were sharper than ever. Maybe not. But today, humanity is here. The makeshift shelter carved into the frozen mountain was never meant to sustain life. Kane Drayven knew that all too well. He slumped beside a pile of broken equipment. His Earthborn combat armor was scratched and battered beyond recognition. And Queen Xalara, once the cold, proud warrior of the Elyrian bloodline, was now just a wounded woman leaning back against the icy rock wall, her pale golden eyes, once radiant with pride, now sunken in a silence that felt almost cruel. No more war, no more titles, no more armies, just two lives, left behind on a dying world. And the distance between them had grown silent enough to hurt. Kane opened the cap on his last remaining water ration. In Earthborn military code, the greatest taboo was sharing water with someone who was as good as dead. But he didn't hesitate. He held it out toward her. Drink. Xalara looked at him for a long moment. Among the Illyrians, this was an insult. Water was the blood of warriors. Only those deemed worthy could drink, but Kane didn't care. He was human. A species born to do the things no one else dared. She took it, wordlessly, a small sip. Then she looked up, straight into his eyes for the first time since the wreckage. Her voice came low. "You're a fool, Earthborn." Kane smiled. "Maybe, but I'm still alive." Xalara let out a faint laugh, dry, fragile, but more genuine than any of the Elyrian glory he'd seen before. They sat there, in the cold, in the dark, no longer warriors, just survivors. Xalara whispered, "Illyrians do not fear death. But we fear something else." Kane turned to her. "What is it?" She looked away, but her voice still pierced with quiet clarity. "We fear being forgotten. Fear of dying and leaving nothing behind." Kane understood. That wasn't just an Elyrian fear, it was deeply human, real, primal. He replied slowly, not boastful, not brave. Just a whisper, as if speaking only to himself. "I don't know if I'll be alive tomorrow. But if I have to die, I just want someone to remember me." A beat of silence. Then Xalara nodded. Slowly. "Earthborn. Perhaps I don't hate you anymore." Outside, the wind shredded steel from the mountain walls, but inside, in that fragile, flickering moment between two surviving souls, something warmer than fire stirred within the dead heart of this frozen world. The last thing left in a being still called human. Faith. Faith in each other. Faith in the smallest things. Faith in not letting each other vanish from this world. The storm winds on Iverna howled without end. No longer the sound of a desolate, dead world, but the roar of a monstrous swarm, the Kolvar, closing in from every direction. Kane Drayven, the last surviving Earthborn soldier, tightened the straps on his scarred, battered armor, bracing his shoulders to support the fragile weight of Queen Xalara, the woman he had risked everything to save from death. Behind them, streaks of crimson and silver blood, human and Elyrian, painted the snow. Ahead of them, a frozen hell, the only path leading to Shelter 09, the last abandoned outpost where there might still be a spark of life. But the Kolvar would not give them time. These bloodthirsty creatures slithered across the ice like ancient predators, their crimson eyes burning like torches in the night, surrounding them from every shadow. "Xalara!" Kane's voice rasped through his steel-wrapped mask. "Hold on to me." The Elyrian queen, once proud enough to bow to no empire, now quietly pressed herself against his back. Her hand settled on his chest plate, right over the place where a human heart pounded wildly. But not from fear, from something far more sacred. Life. The life was growing inside her, the child born of human and Elyrian blood, the first life, capable of rewriting the history of the stars. Kane roared, a raw, primal sound, and drove his boots into the snow, charging straight into the Kolvar swarm like a mad beast protecting its den. He was no longer an Earthborn soldier. He was a man, a father-to-be, and he fought not to survive, but to shield the last home he had left, the only woman remaining in his world. Every shot from his plasma rifle no longer rang cold and distant. It burned with fury, with love, with human blood and defiance. Kolvar fell in waves, but still they surged forward, relentless as the sea. Behind him, Xalara clung tightly to his armored shoulder, and her silver-violet eyes no longer held the cold stare of a queen. They were the eyes of a mother. She whispered through the freezing wind, "Kane, don't die. Because if you fall, I and our child will have nowhere left to return to." Those words tore through the heart of the Earthborn warrior. He turned, his blue eyes blazing brighter than the plasma fire. "I won't die. Because I still have to live long enough to teach our child that family is the one thing in this universe no one is ever allowed to touch." The battle between man and Kolvar on the frozen world of Yverna. It was no longer about territory. It was no longer about survival. This was a battle of those who had no way left to run, of the weakest creatures, but also the strongest, because they fought for family. Heratos 4, a land once reduced to a wasteland, a graveyard of endless war. Now under for Kane Drayven, it had become the final border between death and something far more sacred. Life. He carried Xalara, the Elyrian queen, across the last frozen ridges. Her breath grew weaker, but her eyes never died. Ahead of them, between cliffs covered in ash and ruin, a gate appeared, silent, waiting, as if it had stood there for thousands of years. For this moment alone, silver veins of light spiraled across its arch. Ancient Elyrian symbols glowed like tiny flames within the stillness. This place was the sanctuary of life, a place reserved only for souls standing on the edge of their final boundary. Kane stood frozen, not from fear, but because, for the first time in his life, a warrior born for war could feel that life was fragile enough to kneel before it. Xalara whispered, her voice dissolving into the cold wind. "This is the place where Illyria either accepts or rejects a life born of two worlds." Kane didn't hesitate. He lifted her and stepped through that glowing gate, like a man who had cast aside every rule of humankind, holding on to only one truth: I will not let the one I love die. Inside the sanctuary, everything was silent. Strands of light drifted in the air, like rivers of ancient memory, and at its center stood the life pillar, the purest energy in the universe, waiting for them. Xalara looked at Kane, her eyes overflowing with a strange emotion she had never known. You understand, Earthborn. This ritual, if we fail, your soul will belong to no world. Kane smiled faintly, a smile no longer belonging to a special operative, but to a bare, unarmored man, daring to love, daring to die. Then let my soul belong to you. Together they placed their hands upon the life pillar. The ancient Elyrian runes ignited around them, time melted away. They could feel each other's heartbeat, every pulse, merging, but not only that, a third heartbeat, faint, small, but growing between them. A new life, their child, their blood, the hope of two worlds. Xalara wept, not from weakness, but because, for the first time in her life, a queen who had ruled over thousands of stars understood the true meaning of the word family. Kane gripped her hand tighter, his voice low, steady, filled with promise. There is no war greater than protecting the one you love. There is no victory more beautiful than saving new life. And deep within the heart of that sanctuary, the vow of life was carved into their souls, unbreakable, irrevocable, and no one in this universe could ever separate them again. Heratos 4. Still a land devoured by ice, ash, and silence. But now, within that dead stillness, a burst of pure white light tore through space, igniting like an explosion across the void. And from within the sanctuary of life, two figures stepped forward, no longer the Kane Drayven and Queen Xalara of before. They did not walk, they appeared, as if born directly from the light itself. Kane was clad in semi-organic armor, forged by the sanctuary Notstall, streams of silver energy pulsing across his arms, fused directly into his spinal cord. Xalara no longer wore the robes of a queen. She now bore battle-woven armor, blazing in radiant orange, a seamless blend of ancient Elyrian heritage and the unmistakable design of humanity. At her chest, a silver-lit heart pulsed, not only beating for herself, but for the life growing within her. Our child. Xalara's voice trembled, her breath merging with the cold. How do you feel? She asked. Kane lifted his eyes to the blood-red sky of ash. Feels like I'm not afraid of death anymore. I'm no longer someone born just to obey. From now on, every step I take is for you and for our child. Xalara's breath caught, not from the cold, but because for the first time someone had chosen her, not for power, not for bloodline, not for duty, but because she was simply her. Kane's radar flared, Kolvar signals, countless, swarming toward the coordinates of the sanctuary, as if the universe itself demanded proof. Were these two who emerged from immortality truly legends? They're here, Kane growled, gripping his glowing spear. Infused with Elyrian energy by Xalara herself. Let them come, she answered. Let them see why a child born of two worlds is what makes the galaxy tremble. And then the battlefield shattered. Kolvar stormed from every direction like a steel hurricane. But this time, they weren't hunting survivors. They were facing beings born from the very legacy of life itself. Kane surged forward, his eyes no longer the cold steel of a soldier, but the burning fire of a father. He spun, his silver spear slicing through the air, cleaving through the neck of a Kolvar Alpha. Xalara did not retreat. She whispered ancient light-bound words, summoning a living shield to protect the child within her womb. And from her back, two radiant wings of energy unfurled, like the wings of legend. A colossal Kolvar roared and lunged. Xalara did not flinch. She passed through it. One strike, One graceful turn, a violet blade of light cut clean through the monster, dividing it in two without touching the ground. "What are we?" Kane roared between blood and brilliance. Xalara answered, like a blade carving into destiny itself. "We are those who bring life into the heart of death." The battle had only just begun, but the world already knew. A new legend had been born. No one would call Kane an Earthborn soldier again. No one would dare see Xalara as a political tool of the Elyrians. Because from this moment onward, they were the symbol of an unbreakable bond. A family, standing against an entire galaxy. The winds over Heratos IV twisted into electromagnetic storms. This was no longer nature's wrath. It was the planet itself reacting, as if recoiling from the presence of two beings who had stepped out of the sanctuary of life, now wielding a power that every species in the stars had once called forbidden. Kane Drayven spun, parrying a Kolvar claw with a movement sharp as machinery, but carrying the raw weight of something far older. The instinct of a parent. His spear blazed, the Elyrian energy veins within it reacting directly to his neural signals. No thought, no strategy. He merely willed it, and the spear tore through two Kolvar with precision so perfect it was as if the universe itself guided his hand. Behind him, Xalara stood at the heart of the battlefield, the light radiating from her body pulsing like a biological beacon, sending an unspoken signal of defiance to every living thing. She wasn't fighting for her kingdom, not for honor. She was fighting for something that had never existed in Elyrian history before. A child born from both worlds. "Can you feel it?" Xalara whispered through their neural link. Kane pivoted, narrowly evading a thrust from behind, retaliating with a spear strike that shattered his attacker to ash. "Feel what?" "It." A shiver ran down Kane's spine. This wasn't technology, it wasn't a biosignal, it wasn't radar, it wasn't a heartbeat monitor, it was will. A new will, fragile, newborn, pulsing within Xalara's body, and flowing through Kane's veins like freshly forged blood. The child. Kane exhaled. It's sensing the world? More than that. Xalara's eyes glowed now, a radiant silver-violet burning brighter than ever. It's learning how to protect its parents. A pause. Then, every survival system within Kane's armor surged to triple efficiency. Reaction time doubled. Target analysis refined to atomic accuracy. Heart rate stabilized beyond human limits. A Kolvar lashed out, claws spinning like serrated saws. No one could have reacted in time, but Kane's body moved on its own. He didn't think, he didn't calculate. The child within Xalara had done it for him. The neural bond between all three of them had evolved into a complete instinctive combat network. "We," Kane roared, gripping the spear now burning like a second sun, "we're never the weak ones." Xalara arched forward, her arms unfurling like wings ablaze. A spiraling wave of energy swept through, vaporizing a dozen Kolvar in an instant. Not magic, not science, but a fusion that transcended all definitions. "Ready?" she asked, her gaze turning east. Kane followed her eyes, his radar flashing tens, then hundreds of incoming signatures. Kolvar reinforcements. No problem. Kane clenched his grip. Because this time, we don't fight for ourselves. We fight for the only thing stronger than war, family. Together they charged into battle like two feral celestial forces, one blazing silver, the other burning orange. the light of those who no longer belong to the old world. And in that rebirth, no one dared call them human or Elyrian anymore. They were living legends. They were a warning sent to every power across the stars that had ever dared underestimate love, life, and the primal instinct of a parent. Heratos IV, a dead, frozen, and merciless land, had finally fallen silent after the fury of the Kolvar. But this silence was no longer the silence of death. It was the silence of something fragile, a fleeting moment, where amidst the ruins and blood-stained battlefield, something still existed that surpassed every weapon either civilization had ever forged. Kane Drayven sat slumped against a snow-covered stone wall, his Earthborn combat armor torn, scarred with the marks of countless battles to the death. But his eyes now no longer searched for enemies. They looked forward, toward her, toward Xalara, quietly, steadfastly placing her slender but unshakable hand upon her belly. And amidst the storms of Heratos IV, a tiny heartbeat, frail yet proud, was growing within her. Human blood, Elyrian royal blood, the lifeblood of two species once thought impossible to unite. Kane clenched his fist. He wasn't a man who believed in fate. He was Earthborn, born to defy destiny. But in that moment, what was beating inside Xalara wasn't lineage, it wasn't power, it wasn't a symbol. It was life, the first life between human and Elyrian, conceived upon the blood-soaked battlefield of the deadliest world in the galaxy. "Are you sure?" Kane whispered, voice hoarse from exhaustion, and from the terror that this was nothing more than a fragile dream. Xalara smiled, a smile he had never seen before, softer than any light across Iverna's frozen sky. "This child is the only thing still alive in a world that has died. And the reason, we are no longer alone." Kane froze. A surge of emotion rose in his chest, not from victory, not from survival, but because, for the first time in his life, on a hopeless frozen planet, he felt something that years of war had never taught him. Hope. He dropped to his knees, placed his calloused hand over hers, where new life was stirring. "We will protect it," he vowed, "even if we have to burn Heratos IV to the ground." Xalara stared at him for a long time, and in her eyes there was no longer the cold queen of Elyrian royalty, but the first mother of a child that had never existed in any legend, a child born not from power, not from prejudice, but from the meeting of two souls who once believed they belonged nowhere, and in the farthest, coldest edge of the universe. At that very moment, Heratos IV was no longer a land of death. It had become the birthplace of a new legend, a seed of life, rising above all war and hatred. Heratos IV never lets peace linger for long. Just hours after discovering the most miraculous truth of his life, Kane Drayven was reminded of the most brutal law of the universe. The Kolvar feel no emotion. They recognize no life. They know only the hunt, only slaughter, and they were coming. Wave after wave, like the final nightmare surging to devour everything left on this frozen wasteland. Kane's HUD radar flared crimson. Enemy biosignatures blotted the screen. So dense it felt like even a single breath might summon death closer. He tightened the straps on his battered armor. His wounds still bled. But his eyes, they no longer carried the gaze of a lone Earthborn soldier. They were the eyes of a father, a man who would protect his family and to the very last breath. Behind him, Xalara still stood, her hand resting on her belly, where fragile life was steadily growing. Kane roared, the sound of a beast cornered at the edge of the world. "You want to kill me? Fine, but I swear that not a single Kolvar lays a claw on my family." The wind shrieked, but the fire in his chest burned hotter than any storm Heratos IV could conjure. The Kolvar swarmed, from every direction, from above, from cracks in the ice, like a tidal wave of black steel and death. But this time, they picked the wrong enemy. Kane activated full combat mode. His muscles surged, Elyrian energy fibers ignited in his bloodstream, weaving into Earthborn tech, forming something the Kolvar had never faced before. A warrior of the family, a beast protecting his pack. His plasma rifle howled, every shot a curse carved in fire. Kolvar dropped, torn apart in sprays of armor and gore. Beside him, Xalara moved like a living blade. She was no longer a cold queen, she was a mother warrior bearing the first child of two worlds. Not a single strike wasted, not a single step hesitated. Every motion driven by one truth, the instinct to protect what mattered most. Two hearts, one front line. Kane glanced at her. "Xalara, If we die today?" She didn't smile. She only nodded. "Then we die together." But before that happened, they spoke as one. "They'll have to step over our corpses first." Blood spilled, bones shattered, explosions roared across Heratos IV. But not for conquest, not for empire, not for glory, not for orders, for one thing only: family. The ash-blackened sky of the frozen planet Evenra still loomed heavy with the smoke of war. But within that darkness, a new light was quietly forming. Not the light of weapons, not the light of warships or mobile fortresses, but the light of life. The one force that war has never been able to fully extinguish. Kane Drayven sat still inside an ancient stone chamber buried deep in the mountains of Evenra. Beside Xalara Vel'ryn, his hand rested gently on the curve of her belly, where the most miraculous thing he'd ever known was beginning to take shape. A child, a living soul, an impossible union between human flesh and Elyrian royal blood. They had survived hell. They had killed to protect one another. They had faced unimaginable enemies. And now, all of it had led to this one quiet moment. Xalara whispered, her gaze softer than any star Kane had ever seen. "Kane, what we carry with us isn't just life. It's the future. A new legend for everyone who's ever been cast aside." Kane nodded. His voice was hoarse, dry, but as real as the calloused hand resting on her stomach. "There's no throne waiting for me. No earth left to return to. But you and this child, you are my home." In their hearts now, there was no space for fear, only protection. Only the instinct to exist, not for glory, not for advanced weapons, not for power among the stars, but to protect something sacred. Outside the stone shelter, Evenra's skies began to rumble. The Kolvar were closing in. Following the last trace of their scent, those extermination beasts would never forgive the existence of this child. A hybrid life form, representing everything they loathed. But Kane did not flinch. He stood. Xalara rose beside him, her Elyrian eyes burning with a cold brilliance like steel forged in war. They looked at each other. No words needed, because they had known for some time now. If this is to be our final battle, then let the whole galaxy remember the name of this family. Kane gripped his plasma rifle tight. Xalara activated her twin silver Elyrian blades, once the heirloom of royalty. No retreat, no escape. Only one reason left to exist, and to fight. Not to survive, but to rewrite the legend among the stars upon the frozen wasteland of Heratos IV. The final nightmare had arrived. The Kolvar, the most ruthless predators in the galaxy, no longer hid in the shadows. They came like a tidal wave of darkness, flooding through every crack, every mountain peak, every shattered ruin left upon this battlefield. The sound of 1,000 gnashing teeth and razor claws scraped across the landscape like hell's own symphony. Kane Drayven stood there, atop a high cliff, beside Xalara Vel'ryn. Their eyes held no fear, no retreat. In Kane's hands, his plasma rifle, hardened through countless hours of relentless combat, hummed with deadly readiness. In Xalara's grip, her Elyrian warblade no longer gleamed as a mere symbol. It burned, alive, as the soul of her entire people. "They outnumber us 1,000 to 1, Xalara whispered, her voice no longer that of a queen, but of a mother. Kane simply gave a faint grin. "But they don't carry what we carry inside." He turned his head, meeting her gaze. "We don't fight for Orion. We don't fight for Earth. We fight for this child." A pulse of emotion flowed through their shared lifelink. Right there, in that bond, was a growing life, fragile yet fiercely alive, beating between them like an immortal reminder. As the Kolvar surged from 3 directions, Kane Drayven was the first to charge. His plasma rifle roared. A storm of lethal fire tore through Kolvar armor and flesh. Every shot, not just a weaponized skill, but a belief that he would survive. Xalara did not retreat. She followed, her body moving like a silver current of living energy, her war blade cleaving through any who dared approach. Their every motion was synchronized, perfect. No signals, no commands, only instinct and the bond of 2 warriors who belonged to each other. The Kolvar's howls became the backdrop to their symphony of survival. Kane's body bled from countless wounds, armor torn, blood flowing. But never, not once, did he stop. Xalara saw him through the ash-stained air of war. In her eyes, he was no longer a soldier. He was the foundation of everything Elyrian had forgotten. To fight, not for honor, but for love. And when the final strike of her blazing blade tore through the Kolvar overlord, severing the mind of the beast swarm, Kane Drayven stood there, blood and ice mixing at his feet. He looked up to the shattered sky of Heratos IV. "Do you hear me?" His voice was rough, grounded, unshakable. "This is humanity speaking. We are not legends, but we are the ones who will write them." And across the fields of ash, among the fallen Kolvar, a forest of death, 2 survivors stood, hand in hand, ready to step into the final chapter of their story. No more fear, only one path left: to live, to love, and to protect the smallest heartbeat growing within Xalara Vel'ryn, the new symbol of a future where the stars would no longer divide them. Morning rose over Heratos IV. For the first time in years, true sunlight pierced through the ash-thick sky. Not from fusion cores, not from plasma fire, but from a real sun, casting its rays down upon 2 souls seated among the ruins of war. Kane Drayven sat with his back against a fractured stone slab, his armor shredded, his rifle depleted, his heart still beating. Beside him, Xalara Vel'ryn, queen of a fallen empire, mother to a life growing quietly within her. A child never before seen in the history of Orion or Earth. A child of two bloods. "Do you think," Xalara whispered, her voice soft as morning wind, "the child will look more like you or me?" Kane didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted toward the horizon, where rescue ships had begun their descent. "Like us," he said at last, "like what we became, when we were no longer defined by war or species." She let out a gentle laugh, the first real smile since the final battle, and perhaps the most beautiful one he had ever seen. "I once thought merging our peoples was an insult to the divine," she murmured. "But now I understand. We didn't insult the gods. We taught them how to love again." From the distance, Elyrian warriors and Earthborn soldiers began to approach. Their weapons remained sheathed. Their eyes no longer held suspicion. They walked slowly, as if approaching something greater than themselves, something that history itself would have to pause to witness. Kane rose, helping Xalara to her feet, not as a soldier, not as a conqueror, but as a father. "This world began with war," he whispered, "but it will endure because of this child." As they walked toward the nearest dropship, every gaze turned toward Xalara. Her belly had begun to swell, and the child growing faster than anything either civilization had ever seen. An Earthborn soldier stepped forward, saluting. "We received the signal, sir. All Earthborn and Elyrian bases have entered ceasefire negotiations. The Elyrian High Command has agreed." An elder Elyrian approached. His silver eyes lingered on Xalara, then Kane, and finally settled on the unborn child. "We once believed such union was impossible," he said. "But perhaps the real impossibility was continuing to live without change," and he bowed. For the first time in Elyrian history, a high elder knelt before an unborn child. "This," he said, "is our new symbol. Not Elyrian, not Earthborn, but for all who dared to love in the middle of war." 1 month later, at the newly established Earth-Elyrian Peace Assembly, a ceremony was held. The child was born, in light, in faith, and in nameless tears. A daughter, eyes of silver gold, hair black with threads of Elyrian blue, and a heart that beat with the rhythm of two civilizations. Her name was Xalara Drayven. She was not born of royal decree, not the product of experiment, not the spoil of war. She was born of one thing alone: compassion. And so, the legend ends here, but not to close it, to open what humanity has always believed in, and that some things are stronger than death, love, family, and a heart that refuses to kneel. If you followed this story all the way to the end, Nondon, you are now a part of it. Hold on to that heart, because somewhere out there in this universe, there are still Heratos 4s, waiting for someone like you to arrive and rewrite the legend. There are stories out there, not written for the strongest, not told for the richest, but reserved for those who dare to keep walking, even when the whole world turns its back on them. Today, Kane Drayven and Xalara Vel'ryn, they survived, not because of advanced technology, not because of superior weapons, not because of flawless tactics, but for one reason, and one reason only: because they were human, because they never left anyone behind, not on the battlefield, and not within their hearts. And if you're here, listening to this story, I just want to tell you one thing. Out there, your life may not be as grand as a war among the stars, but you're fighting too, every single day, fighting to be better, fighting to protect what matters most, fighting so that you don't become someone cold, empty, and alone. So, If you believe in humanity, if you believe in stories that make your heart beat faster, if you believe that we were born to rewrite our own legends, then hit subscribe to HFY Stories Human today. Here, we tell stories about people, about the underdogs who achieve the impossible, about those who, even when they fall, leave behind a story so powerful that the entire galaxy has no choice but to stop and listen. See you again in the next legend.